What metrics should you use to evaluate your website speed and performance? There are a lot of different metrics available to measure website speed, including all of Google's Core Web Vitals metrics. So it is definitely overwhelming and sometimes a bit intimidating to know which of those metrics you actually ought to use and which of those metrics is the most important. Do you only need to pay attention to Google's Core Web Vitals metrics, or are there others you need to pay attention to, and so on? To make this less overwhelming, the way I like to think about it is to break the website loading process down into different stages. And then you pick a metric that describes something about that particular stage of the website loading process. And if you look at one or two metrics describing each stage of the website loading process, you can get a good sense of where problems might exist. You have problems at one stage more than another stage of the website loading process. You know where to focus and you know what kind of projects to work on to improve your website's speed. So let's go through what those stages are at a high level. I'm going to oversimplify this quite a bit. So initially, we have the request come in from the visitor that they want to visit a particular website, and that request is made in the browser. So once the browser receives that request, the browser has to send the request along to that particular website's server. The server then receives that request and has to process all the files associated with the requested page. So the server might have to go and query a database file or go and find a bunch of different files located on the server, images and so on, that are connected with that particular page and start building all of those out. So that's the initial connection to the website, right? The browser and the server has to establish a connection. The server has to start building out those particular files that are needed for the requested page. Then we move into the middle stages of the website loading process. So in the middle stages of the website loading process, the browser now is receiving the information from the server. The server's sending things back to the browser and the browser's ingesting that information. And as the browser is receiving that information, it has to figure out what to do with it. It's got a bunch of code, it's got a bunch of files, but it has to figure out how do I actually present that on the page for somebody to see. Then we move into the final stages of the website loading process. And in the final stages of the website loading process, the browser finishes displaying the web page, finishes displaying all the files and all the code that it's received. And then at some point, as the website finishes its load, then people can actually begin interacting with the page. They can start clicking on buttons and tapping on links, and they can start playing videos and doing whatever else they want to do on that particular page. So those are the main stages that we can think about: the initial connection, the middle stages of presenting the page, and then the final stages when the website finishes loading. And we can select metrics that describe something about each of those stages. So in those initial stages of the website loading process, one metric that's really helpful to use is something called time to first byte, or TTFB. Time to first byte, or TTFB, measures how long it takes between the initial request being received by the browser and when the server sends back the very first byte of data to the browser. That very first byte of data is not by any means the entirety of the website, but it does mean that the server has processed enough of this website and they've gone through and found all the things in the database or wherever else on the server that it needs to complete this request, that's able to at least send something back to the browser. And if time to first byte, or TTFB, is really high, then that means that everything else on the website will be really slow as well, because those initial stages are going to slow everything else down, and you know that you have a problem that needs to be addressed at those stages. So we think about the middle stages, that process of the browser displaying everything. It's a process known as rendering and painting. And there are metrics that describe rendering and painting, and we can look at those and see if we have problems there. One metric that's particularly helpful is something called First Contentful Paint, or FCP. FCP says when things actually began painting to the page. So when did somebody actually start to see something more than a blank white screen that they were staring at? Then as we move into the final stage of the website loading process, we have things like Largest Contentful Paint, or LCP. LCP says when the biggest item of content was painted to the page. And usually people really need to see this biggest item of content to feel like the page is complete and feel like the page is actually ready to use. So if LCP is slow, then that means that people are going to feel like this website has a poor user experience. LCP is also one of Google's Core Web Vitals. Another metric we can use in those final stages of the website loading process is something called Time to Interactive, or TTI. Time to interactive, or TTI, measures how long it takes from the initial request of the website to when people can actually begin interacting with this website. When can people actually click on those links? When can people tap on those buttons and expect the website to be able to respond to their request? So that becomes a pretty helpful metric to use. Another metric you can use to understand interactions is a metric called Interaction to Next Paint, or INP. This is another one of Google's Core Web Vitals. And it too says something about these final stages of the website loading process where people can now interact with the website. How long does it take for people to interact? So there's a lot that I just went through, but the main takeaway that you should walk away from this video with is that there are different stages of the website loading process. And when you come across a new metric that you're not familiar with, you want to think through, well, where does this metric fit? What is this metric actually telling me? Where is it actually describing something about the website loading process? And you want to make sure, as you look at your speed reports and as you're evaluating website speed, that you do have metrics that describe each of these main stages of the website loading process. If you'd like to learn more about some of these different metrics that you can use to measure and evaluate your website speed, I have a book called Speed Metrics Guide, published by Apress in early 2024. Speed Metrics Guide goes through all the different metrics that you can use to measure and evaluate your website speed, walks through how you can actually measure each of these items, and what to do if some of these metrics are slower, and what kinds of projects you may want to prioritize. You can find Speed Metrics Guide on Amazon or learn more about it at speedmetricsguide.com. If you have questions about website speed or need help improving your website speed or just measuring your website speed, please email me at matthew@elementive.com. If you liked this video and would like to see more like it from Elementive, please subscribe. Thank you for watching.